This is QuickTime Gaming, the only show that tells you whether a game respects your time and what sort of time budget you'll need to make the most of it. With the release of the PlayStation 5 just under a month away, and its fantastic offering of the PlayStation Plus collection, bringing some of the best of the previous generation to gamers, I thought it would be a good time to have a look at some of these older titles and see which of them will be easy to slot into your life and which of them will make a mockery of your time. So let's begin with one of the most beloved games from the PlayStation 4, Bloodborne. Bloodborne comes from developer From Software, who are responsible for the Demon's Souls and Dark Souls games. So we already know this is going to be a game that challenges you and asks for an incredible demonstration of skill and concentration. Set in the gothic Victorian city of Yharnam and its surrounding areas, with hints of Lovecraftian horror, Bloodborne impressed gamers and critics alike, and still sits comfortably at a score of 92 on Metacritic. That tells us a lot of people think the game is pretty good, but what sort of time commitment does it take? Well, let's look at that now and save you the pain of finding out for yourself. When you boot Bloodborne, you have the option to play online or offline. Online gives you the ability to summon other players to help out with particularly difficult areas, but also opens you up to invasions. Playing offline allows you to go through the game without having to worry about interacting with others. Bloodborne immediately throws you into an opening cutscene that, quite frankly, is just confusing. Cutscenes are skippable for those who have no time or interest in the story. Unfortunately, however, they are not pausable in any way, much like the rest of the game. If you find yourself at a cutscene, you either need to see it through or skip it. Once this scene is done and your character has been created, you are ready to start the game. If you started to find that sound annoying, I've got some bad news for you. I'll get right to it. The early game of Bloodborne is one of the worst experiences of the current generation when it comes to respecting your time. I have seen so many players quit during this stage of the game because of a combination of unforgiving difficulty, high skill ceiling, and some frankly mind-boggling design decisions. Bloodborne, like most of From Software's works, is a game that focuses on incremental increases in skill and rewards mastery of its systems and enemies. This is a game where every encounter can kill you, and it is happy to throw out of the blue heart attacks at you, like this guy. You may have the reflexes and self-awareness required to deal with this when you first encounter it, but odds are you will die, and be better prepared for the next time you hit that street. To make matters worse, the only way to get better at the game at the start is just to get better. The ability to improve your stats and give yourself some much-needed damage increases or health increases is locked behind a second currency known as insight. The only way to acquire this currency is to either find consumables lying around in the world or by interacting with the game's bosses. Both encountering them for the first time and defeating them rewards insight. Now thematically, this is beautiful. Requiring your character to understand the world they find themselves in just a little before being able to make use of it makes perfect sense from a storytelling perspective. However, mechanically, I just cannot fathom why someone thought that this was a good idea. Given the difficulty of reaching the first boss or finding the first consumable, denying players the ability to improve their character, instead forcing them to go through the same encounters over and over and over, while a lot of these players are still struggling to get to grips with combat and all of its moving pieces, is, quite frankly, inexcusable. Speaking of the intricacies of combat, let's take a look at what learning Bloodborne is like. Bloodborne's learning curve is difficult to explain. I reached out to the game's subreddit to see how other players handled it, and it seems there are two main camps a new player of Bloodborne can fall into: the completely new or the From veteran. The veterans have come from other From Software games, Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Sekiro. They know the drill, and it's simply a matter of adjusting their playstyle to the unique mechanics of Bloodborne. These players are often comfortable with the combat and the playstyle by the time the first two bosses have been taken care of. The most difficult part for the Dark Souls players seems to be a shift in mindset from a game predominantly about defense to one with a much larger focus on aggression. For the completely new players, though, it's a completely different story. The replies I received from these players told me of entire evenings spent against a single boss, hours spent attempting to cross the first courtyard, and one player described his experience saying that each area felt like a new game. Bloodborne not only requires you to master timing and precision with your attacks and evasion, but is host to a slew of mechanics and tactics it doesn't explain, leaving it to the player to figure out. These can range from the fairly obvious rally mechanic that recovers health if you attack after taking damage, to the vital for gameplay but unintuitive to understand parry mechanic, where if you shoot something before it attacks, you can stun that thing and get a huge counterattack off. Learning Bloodborne is a trial, and while the moment differs for every player, it seems there is always a point where things click and everything falls into place. Not a great piece of advice for those looking to learn, but I can say from my own experience that if you invest your time in this game and reach this moment, it does feel both rewarding and empowering. Now, while discovering these mechanics can be fun and can make exploring the complexities of combat rewarding, the amount of time you lose through death, trial and error, and simply taking longer to beat bosses as you lack some of your most potent tools can slow progress considerably. And given that each death sends you a ways back to redo the last segment all over again, those are hours that could have been put to better use elsewhere. But that is Bloodborne's core philosophy and the driving force behind its gameplay loop. If at first you don't succeed, mercifully, with the complexity and high skill ceiling of combat, the core loop at the heart of Bloodborne is remarkably simple. Fight your way through waves of enemies on your way to a boss, and fight the boss. If you fail, then respawn at the last checkpoint, known as lanterns, and try the whole thing again. If you succeed, congratulations, here's a new checkpoint, and now go do it again. As you play, you'll get new weapons and gear, as well as a primary currency you can spend to invest in your stats and increase your power. While there is the occasional puzzle and optional area to discover, for the most part these are easier to figure out than the earlier mentioned combat mechanics. Item descriptions often provide you a good clue as to where you need to be or what you need to do. This loop may be simple, but it is one that can take time, as each death is a chance to learn and push just a little bit further ahead than last time. However, due to the resetting nature of the game, with traps and enemies respawning each time you die, or even travel between areas using the lanterns, it's easy to see why it can take new players hours before any tangible progress has been made in the defeat of a new boss or discovery of a new lantern. With such a large time investment, it's safe to assume that you'll be taking breaks and putting the game down for a night, or a few months if your last death felt particularly bad. So, how easy is it to slip back into Yharnam? Given that Bloodborne treats obfuscation and mystery as some sort of holy relics, it should come as no surprise that there are no in-game guides to help understand where you're going. No logbook of current objectives, and no trophies of past bosses in which to gauge progress. However, despite this, finding your way back after a break in play is actually rather simple. You're always working towards a boss, and the game is generally good at subtly guiding you as to which way is forward through the use of its environment. Also, because of the way your lanterns are organized in the Hunter's Dream, the hub area of the game, it's easy to know which is the latest in your list of unlocked checkpoints. The only time this causes an issue is should you need to backtrack to an area for some reason, and when this is the case, knowing where, why, or how becomes a lot less clear. The hardest part about jumping into Bloodborne, however, especially after a prolonged period away, will be getting back into the swing of combat as you remember what does what and re-familiarize yourself with the ebb and flow of encounters. With all of the things mentioned so far, we've covered most of what to expect if you choose to invest your time into this game. However, there are a couple more points worth mentioning. Fast traveling between areas in the game is possible, though the implementation leaves much to be questioned. Unlike the previous Dark Souls games where you could travel from one checkpoint to another with ease, Bloodborne forces you to travel to the Hunter's Dream and from there to your final destination. Not only is this process cumbersome, but the load times between areas is also ridiculous. However, one area in which the game gets some credit is the automatic reloading of items into your inventory. Every item has a maximum amount you can carry at once, with extras you find automatically being sent to your storage chest in the dream. One would half expect this requires a trip to and from every time you run low to restock, but thankfully Bloodborne is smart enough to automatically pull items from your chest and load them into your inventory every time you die, so that you can always start with the maximum amount of bullets and health vials available to you. Finally, there is technically a manual for the game that you can find online. It takes you through the controls, and I've been told it even explains some of the mechanics. However, for reasons beyond the comprehension of anyone, every time you go to the next page you need to re-enter your date of birth. Every single time. And trying to log in doesn't work. Now, I've seen some truly bad decisions to waste people's time, but this one is something that I can't begin to fathom. We have cross-page memory and cookie information. There is no reason I need to enter this information. Before we look at the average time investment you'll need to get through Bloodborne and our final verdict, if you have any questions about the game or the review, wanted to discuss your thoughts and experiences, or just want to hang out and chat, then I do stream every week on Twitch. There's a link to the channel below with a schedule to be found, but my next stream is Friday the 30th of October, and then every Friday for the next 3 weeks after that. So come and say hi. Also, if you like what I'm doing and think more games need to be put under the time budget microscope, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know that you guys value the content, and I will love you forever for the support. Anyway, back to our scheduled program. Bloodborne is not a short game, with howlongtobeat.com informing us that the base game requires an average of 34.5 hours, and the DLC adding an extra 10 hours on top of that. If, however, you're a completionist, know that you'll be looking at an investment of roughly 76.5 hours. And that's before talking about the infinite replayability thanks to the ability to do multiple New Game Plus runs. Honestly, as much as I love Bloodborne, I have a hard time justifying it under the lens of a strict time budget. Archaic design choices and pointlessly hidden systems add hours of inefficient gameplay, and the inability to level up along with the constant resetting of enemies upon death means you can spend far too long at the start of the game without ever making progress. Waiting for that click moment to happen means everything before that is just frustrating, and if you constantly have to step away for work or other duties, then finding the will to get back into it can be difficult at times. This game took me a month to complete around university and a new relationship. I have far less time now to justify sinking into this if I were a new player. If, though, you don't mind the idea of the grind, and the thought of seeing yourself push further each time and finally be rewarded with the satisfaction of conquering a challenge excites you, then Bloodborne will give you that, and it will give it to you for a long time. If, however, you want to be able to make progress and get through the games you play with the time you have, then I would look elsewhere to spend your time. Once again, this has been QuickTime Gaming, the only channel dedicated to saving you time by ensuring you know the time budget you'll need to make the most out of gaming. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.